Hi everyone, I'm Kim. Welcome back. I grow orchids outdoor most of the year, and when it gets colder than 50 degrees Fahrenheit, I bring my orchids inside my tiny sunroom for a few days, then it's out again when it gets warmer. Today, I'm going to do a routine monthly video of orchids in bloom from my collection. I would love to do a video of what's in bloom every 2 weeks if there's enough orchids in bloom to do that. This first orchid here is called SLC, Hsin Buu Lady, and it's red, a great Valentine Day bloomer. I'm going to dub this one my new Valentine orchid because I lost the jewel box orchid that I had dubbed last year as the Valentine orchid. The jewel box orchid had black rot that took over very quickly, and I was not able to save it in time. So we'll call this one the new Valentine's Day orchid. So this orchid is from William's collection of rescue orchids. And if you're not familiar with what I'm talking about, I will leave a link to the video that will explain it and will let you catch up. Basically, I rescued more than 100 orchids from a longtime orchid grower this past April. So the buds on this took a long time to mature, and all the flowers are on the new growth on the edges of the pot. So I tried to tie 2 of the bloom spikes together, and now it looks like a bundle of flowers, and I think it looks better this way. There is still one more bud in the back of the plant that is yet to open. And if I have time this spring, I will divide this one and just keep a couple of the new growth. I think it's getting a little bit big. And by the way, anytime you see a big hole or some weird parts chewed up on any of the rescue orchids, it's because an animal got into William's greenhouse, and I guess it got hungry. Michelle told me that she thinks it's a rat that got in and was looking for food. And I left the damaged leaves still on the plants because I believe that it still does make a lot of food for the plant rather than just cutting the entire leaf off when only half of it is damaged. This next orchid is called RLC, Lawless and Zabra, variety Palmer's Apricot. And it was a bag baby purchased back on about February 12th, 2022 is when I made the video. And I'll leave a link to that video as well in the description below. So it'll be a year exactly that I bought this orchid. And if you're wondering for yours, if you bought the exact same one from Lowe's, how long it took to bloom, this is how long it took for me. And you may even get it bloom sooner. I don't think I gave this one any special treatment. It's just the time that this one was old enough to bloom. And all the other ones from the same batch of bag babies were not blooming yet. I may do an update of that orchid haul. If there's enough interest, let me know if you're interested in that. I will leave a link below if you want to review which orchid haul I'm referring to. I think this orchid is pretty simple to grow, nothing too complicated, just your typical hybrid, Cattleya type hybrids that prefers a very bright light and pretty good feeding during the growing season. And I wasn't sure if it's going to have a fragrance, and on the first few days when it started blooming, didn't have any fragrance, and now it does. It smells of a little bit of sweet fragrance, like perfume. This next one is a Patinera Chief Sweet Orange, and the variety is Sweet Orange. You know, if it weren't for the rescue orchids, I really don't have much of a show here. This is also one of the rescue orchids from William. The nicest thing about William's orchids is that almost all of the 100 orchids are full grown, so I just had to get it back to health from scale and mealybugs and fusarium. Once they are more established and healthier, we'll get more than one bloom. And the intensity on this bloom is amazing. The orange is very striking. And this next one is a Brassavola hybrid called Yellowbird, and it's still going strong. Each time I look at this, I am reminded that I have a big job coming up to divide it. And of course, I'm waiting for the spring weather to warm up before I do this. And as many of you know, that this orchid has been in the original pot since it was purchased, since about spring 2019. Yeah, yikes. Talk about how not to grow orchids, right? This next one is Ctna Why Not? And I recently found out that there is a yellow variety because my friend Janae gave one to me from Tamiami. This one is a hybrid between Bracteosum sanguinea times Cattleya aurantiaca. Sanguinea comes from the Latin word for blood, hence the red color, and aurantiaca means orange, so that contributes to the center color of the flower. And this is native to Mexico and Costa Rica. Okay, this next one is a no ID mini phalaenopsis, and it came from a friend of mine, Peggy, who had lived nearby, and she moved and needed to downsize her plant collection, so she gave it to me last spring. And we didn't know what color it would be, and now I got it to bloom and see that it's a beautiful fuchsia color, so lovely. And if you're watching this, Peggy, thank you so much again. And I grow all of my mini phalaenopsis in clay pebble with a little bit of dressing on top of moss. Most of the time, my mini phals are not in water. I soak it once a week, and then sometimes I will leave a puddle of water in the container. These two white mini phalaenopsis are my most prolific ones. One of them is a keki of the other, and I can't tell you which one is which anymore. I had the original orchid for about 5 years now, and it's gone through scale and spider mites, but with consistent cleaning and with hydrogen peroxide and repotting, it got rid of both scales and spider mites. And I did a video in the past about how I get my phalaenopsis to bloom. I'll leave a link also in the description below of that video. And this one is one of my favorite Vanda type orchid. It is Vandachostylis, Tubtim in variety, I think it's Siam. And this is such an exotic, pretty bloom. This orchid has a Vandachostylis in its genetics, so it bloomed for the first time last year. And then this year, it is the second year blooming, and I got 2 spikes. While I was gone to Vietnam, there was a hard freeze of about less than 20 degrees Fahrenheit. So I had the orchid indoor though. And even if I had the orchid indoor, it was so cold inside. And unfortunately, the spike suffered. The cold stunted the growth of the bloom spike. Ordinarily, there would be a long pendulous chain of flowers of about 20 to 30 blooms on one spike. And I have a video of last year's bloom spike if you want to see it also. And I'm really glad though that we have even 2 tiny spikes rather than none at all. And it is very fragrant. You will never forget the smell of this one once you smell it. I guess I want to say that the description of this scent is like licorice, and it's very powerful. The bloom is also very long lasting. The bloom is very thick and almost very waxy texture. Okay, the next one is Vanda Kuwaldee fragrance, and right now I'm soaking the roots in a bag for this Vanda. The tips are showing signs of stress because the tips of the roots are dying back from lack of humidity, and I am trying to get it rehydrated again. I will keep it under the grow light while it's in a bag for about an hour, and I'll spray it with water inside of the bag. The grow light makes everything looks a bit purple in the camera, so I'm going to bring it outside to the sunroom after I soak this for an hour so that you can see what the orchid really looks like in its natural light. Okay, so now you can see how it's a pretty soft pastel color. And yes, it is very fragrant. It's just a sweet perfume smell to me. And you know, I'm really bad at describing what something smells like, honestly. And one of the greatest thing about this orchid, and I keep forgetting to mention that, and one of our viewers pointed out to me, is that this orchid does not require a lot of leaves or growth lengthening to bloom. It's, as you can see, it's a pretty small short orchid, only with 5 or 6 leaves, and yet it blooms, and it blooms consistently every year. So I really recommend this orchid if you were to choose any Vandas to grow. Okay, the next one is Dendrobium Blue Twinkle. It's a mid-sized dendrobium and very long-lasting bloom also, and super easy to bloom. And you see how the dendrobium has somewhat of a wing structure in the bloom. I think it may have spatulata in its background. I don't know. I haven't checked it out yet, but I'm assuming so. This next one is Dendrobium Nopporn Pink, and it has a white mutation. I love the green edges that makes it's not a typical white dendrobium. And this is one of William's orchid, a rescue orchid. And then this next one is a Dendrobium Nobile hybrid called Dendrobium My Sweet Wink. And this one is also another rescue orchid. And I think I have more rescue orchid blooming than my original orchids. I feel like this is an early Nobile bloomer. The buds mature quickly and it opened quickly too. I have a few more new growth at the base that I will keep watered so that it continues to slowly grow this winter. This next one is Dendrobium farmeri. I will do a separate feature of this dendrobium. It is not a long time bloomer, but it's an easy bloomer though. And here's a second Nobile that I have in bloom. I got this from Denny from Spring Orchids, and it was such a nice price for only about $8, but it has no name on it. So he has a tag on it that just says Dendrobium Nobile Hybrid. And there's a lot of new growth, so I will keep this one watered also. So I normally water my Nobiles after I see the buds because the orchid needs water to support that bud. It doesn't need dry rest anymore after the bud shows up. And the new growth at the base sure can use moisture to keep it growing during the winter, even if it's at a slow, very slow paced growing. You know, normally my Dendrobium nobiles bloom later in the winter, so I feel like this year it's early. 2 of these smaller ones are blooming early. I have 2 more of the larger ones outside that aren't blooming yet, and they haven't developed any the buds yet. You know, if you've seen my Vietnam video, the video that was posted before this one, you may remember that I mentioned when I was traveling in Vietnam on central and northern Vietnam, the weather is very much with rain almost every day, even in the winter, but it has a tiny bit of misting rain. Usually can be throughout the day, you know, at sporadic times. But the whole idea is that the Nobile orchids would get a little bit of the spraying, and it's not completely in a dry environment for all winter. So I'm going to try that this year on my Nobiles, just light spraying. Almost every other day, or at least every 2-3 days. I used to only spray it once a week, but I think I'm going to spray it more because my sunroom is very dry and very hot most of the days. Okay, I think I saved the best orchid. What I feel that I love the most for this time around is this one. This is Dendrobium Bracteosum times Tanii, and I can't get enough of these blooms. It's so striking. I brought this to replace my Dendrobium hibiki that I got from Florida a long time ago, and I actually wanted hibiki, but I haven't found it in my area that didn't have to pay for shipping, so I got this one instead from Carmela with other orchids combined. And I'm so glad that I got this. The bloom lasts forever, and I can't decide what I want to pot it in, so I have been keeping it in bare root, and I have been soaking it in a pot every few days. And I know naturally it likes a lot of water, so when spring comes and it's time to move it outdoors, I'll have to decide right away what to pot it in, because the roots are very thin and they will not last long in dry condition, more than a few days. Originally it was in moss when it was shipped by Carmela, but the moss had so much algae on it when I was growing it in such bright condition. I removed all the moss, and so I may do moss at the bottom 2/3 of the pot and then top it off with coconut coir to prevent that algae from growing into the moss. And I noticed that the blooms have gotten brighter and more brilliant as time goes, and I think that might be, and it's just, I'm not absolutely sure, but I think that might be because it's gotten more well hydrated recently. Okay, if you made it this far to the video, thanks so much for hanging around. I'm having some trouble with my voice, so I'm sorry if I sound real crackly. I'm having some issues with the thyroid surgery that I had. Anyway, I hope you all have a good day, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.